So, yeah, this movie, Citizen Kane, made in 1941. So, this movie is arguably one of the most influential films ever. You can't, no one goes to film school without watching Citizen Kane and studying it, talking about the camera angles and all the different shots and the lighting. This movie's masterful at lighting. I don't know if you guys picked up on a few of the scenes where the lighting is really prominent. Um, the library scene is one of the famous ones where the light shining through the window into the library. That's a very iconic image in the movie. The mirror scene close to the end where he's walking by the mirrors, right? That's another famous shot here. Um, so even the way the movie transitions and the way the plot of the movie is set up was pretty innovative for its time. The movie doesn't go from a linear. The movie isn't, the plot isn't linear, right? It doesn't go from point A to point B, right? We learn and get different new parts about Kane's character depending on who the person's interviewing. All right, that's kind of how the plot's set up. We get different parts of his character based off of who is talking about Kane, whether it's his ex-wife or his old friend. Right, so we get different parts of the truth about Kane depending on who's talking. So by the end of the movie, we kind of have to piece together the puzzle of who is Charles Foster Kane. What did he stand for? Who is he? So I'll Corey, I'll start with you. You said you had questions about the movie. What questions do you have?
Well, the big question, which I think I could answer on my own, but it's just not like I'm 100% sure this is the answer to the question. Uh, Rosebud was the name of the sled, as I spoiled, but uh, I don't get why that was so influential for him. Like, I just don't get why, unless it just is supposed to be a symbol for his loss of childhood, how he was just taken away from his parents.
Crystal, you wrote about that discussion. You want to follow up?
I kind of went back to thinking that that was a thing that he was looking for. I mean, he was always seemed that he was looking for love, but even the wealth and all that didn't add up to what he was actually looking for in his life. I think that was the innocence and maybe the just everyday love and companionship that he had in his life. That simpler time in his life. And that's how I viewed it. That's he was always seemed to be searching for something, and that he was searching for love. It seemed, but yet he didn't know how to love back. Whether that could go into something deeper as far as with his father or whatever, but or maybe that he was raised by bankers. I couldn't tell you, but that's how I took it. That he was resorting back to that time that he was happy. It didn't matter how much money he had, that if he had money or if he didn't, it was just he was outside playing. It was like the best time of his life.
Right.
That completely makes sense. That it just does. And I don't know why, but it kind of has a parallel to The Great Gatsby for me. If anybody else has watched or read that,
Yeah.
it's kind of the same parallels to that. Searching for like your searching for your youth when times weren't so complicated and everything was so simple and you was just playing as a little kid.
Right. And you think that people want, oh, I want money and fame and fortune but that wasn't what was satisfying him. And I think that's why he went through his money so much. Like why he would just buy statues and not even uncrate them, or why he built that big opera hall for the wife that couldn't even sing. But um I think that he was just kind of rebelling against the money because he was just trying to find that love and that simpler time.
That makes sense. thinking
Right.
about it too. Sorry,
Go ahead.
apparently I'm the teacher,
Go ahead.
but uh, it just struck me like just now that maybe just that's the only way he could think to show love was through material stuff, being he was raised by bankers, by people who deal with money every day.
Could be.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. That's why he tries to buy love, right? Because that is pretty much all he knows, right? His second wife accuses him of that when they're fighting pretty close to the end, right? He says you've never really. She says you've never really given me a truly meaningful gift in my life. You buy me stuff, but you never really give me a truly something from the heart, right? That's
Right.
why.
Like he built her that big place, but he didn't do something to just show that he loved her instead of just a material thing.
Yeah, it's a pretty shallow love, kind of hollow. Um, there's a form of love there, but it misses probably what his wives were looking for, and maybe even what he was looking for as he looked back on Rosebud.
Something that maybe you generally, not everyone does, but you generally get that type of love and that type of um, lesson on love from your parents, in your formidable years.
Yeah, Ryan, I'll call on you. You told me in the last class you didn't know the rosebud thing kind of went by your head. You want to talk about? You want to talk about that?
I watched the movie all the way through, and I never once thought of his sled being the Rosebud. I didn't see that. I don't know if it was mentioned to be his sled, but I didn't see the word Rosebud on his sled from when he was a kid. That was a detail I missed.
Then it shows it at the end, though, whenever they're burning everything. They threw that in the fire and it was burning, and it showed that Rosebud, like the lettering on it, burning from the sled, which kind of brings you back to it. Because I didn't notice in the beginning that it said Rosebud on it, but at the end, that kind of sparked my memory that, oh, yeah, that's what that was.
Yeah,
I totally agree. As Ryan said, I was just until the end of the movie when the fire was blazing and the sled went in. That's when it hit me. I mean, it was like that's. It was like this light came on. I'd watched the whole movie, looking for everything, and then there at the last, close to the last scene, it came on. The light came on for me.
the movie beats you over the head with the sled. It gives you lots of foreshadowing. During the scene where the banker is negotiating with the parents. Um, I'll, have to- I'll just pull the movie up and show you.
It's like after you watch the movie, it has to absorb and you kind of flash back and think to, okay, that fits that. And that's why this happened or that was said or this was said.
Let's see. Yeah, the whole time they're talking, they're having this conversation about his future, and let's see if I can skip to the exact moment here. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can see. Yeah, notice the shot. The whole time they're talking about his future, you see Charles playing with the sled outside in the window. So the whole scene, we had the frame within the frame that where you can kind of see him playing with it. Right. So this kind of goes along with what you guys were saying about maybe this is his loss of innocence in a way, right? This is his last innocent moment before he had to be carted off and taken away from his parents. This, well, I'll play a minute or two of this scene, and then we can kind of break it down.
Management of the Colorado load, of which I repeat, Mrs. Kane, you are the sole owner.
Where do I sign, Mr. Thatcher?
Right here, Mrs. Kane.
Mary, I'm asking you for the last time. Anybody think I hadn't been a good
The sum of
husband, a father?
$50,000 a year is to be paid to you and Mr. Kane as long as you both live, and thereafter to the survivor.
Well, let's hope it's all for the best.
It is.
Why I can't raise my own voice more than I can understand.
Go on, Mr. Thatcher.
Everything else, the principal, as well as all monies earned, is to be administered by the bank in trust for your son Charles Foster Kane until he reaches his 25th birthday, at which time he is to come into complete possession.
Charles! Go on, Mr. Thatcher.
Well, it's almost 5, Mrs. Kane. Don't you think I'd better meet the boy?
I've got his trunk all packed. I've had it packed for a week now.
I've arranged for a tutor to meet us in Chicago. I reported him here with me.
Charles, looky, Mom. Better come inside, son.
Well, that's quite a snowman. Did you make it all by yourself, my lad?
Maybe I'll make some teeth and whiskers.
This is Mr. Thatcher, Charles.
Oh.
How do you do, Charles?
He comes from the east.
How?
Hello, Charlie.
Charles?
Yes, Mommy.
Mr. Thatcher's going to take you on a trip with him tonight. You'll be leaving on number 10.
That's the train with all the lights on it.
You going, Mom?
Well, no, your mother won't be going right away, Charles, but she'll...
Where am I going?
You're going to see Chicago and New York and Washington, maybe. Ain't he, Mr. Thatcher?
He certainly is. I wish I were a little boy going on a trip like that for the first time.
Why aren't you coming with us, Mom?
We have to stay here, Charles.
You're going to live with Mr. Thatcher from now on, Charlie. You're going to be rich. Your ma figures. Well, that is, me and her decided this ain't the place for you to grow up in. You'll probably be the richest man in America someday, and you ought to
won't
get
be
an
lonely,
education.
Charles.
Only, of course not. Why, we're going to have some fine times together. Really, we are, Charles. Now, shall we shake hands? Oh, come. I'm not as frightening as all that, am I? Now, what do you say? Let's shake.
Why, Charles.
Charles, you almost hurt me. What's
Charles,
that?
Charlie.
What's that to lay with?
You're I'm sorry, Mr. Thatcher. What that kid needs is a good thrashing.
That's what you think, is it, Jim?
Yes.
That's why he's going to be brought up where you can't get at him.
Watch this. So yeah, I love the shot of the snow covering the sled. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but it's the last time we see the sled before the end of the movie.
Kind of like after the child leaves, you know, the toys are no longer played with and they're just there collecting dust, but in this case it's collecting the snow.
Right.
I think it represents abandonment. The sled was abandoned like he was abandoned by his parents.
I like that. That's a good thought. Yeah.
This movie tore me up. I haven't talked yet, but I watched it and I kept thinking like, where is a good character in this movie? Where is the protagonist? There is none. None of these people were good people, none of them. And I felt sorry for Kane. It's probably the only one that I had sympathy like that for. But even his first wife, she was sitting there reading a whole nother newspaper right in front of him, rubbing stuff in his face. And then the second wife, we all seen what happened with that. Like, there was no good characters. Just puts me on a rant.
That's true.
It was hard to wrap around it. I kept thinking and kept trying to like go into separate, each character and how they acted in the movie, but they all have.
Right. Yeah. I agree. Right. no one in the movie seems to be truly virtuous as far as that goes. Kane has good intentions lots of times, but does he always reach them?
Right. But the reason why I had sympathy with him is because of how he grew up. You know, that's all he was taught. He was trying to guide life through, his own knowledge, go through life with his own, base of what it should be.
Crystal, you want to give us your theory about child abuse that you?
Whenever she had said something to the father, I don't remember the exact quote on that's why that you won't get at him or be around him. I kind of wonder if there was some type of abuse there. What did she see or what did she hear? What did she witness? Was it verbal abuse, physical abuse? Was it even sexual abuse? And, if in case that it was something like that, is that another reason that it was hard for him to show love? Because, that really damages children. And, is that a reason that he was unable to show it properly because he wasn't, he was, screwed up actually from a very young age. I mean, at 8 years old, he was taken, and he was thinking that was the best time, most carefree time in his life. But obviously, something was going on to reason that his mother had his trunk packed for like a week, and that she was sending him off at 8 years old, even after they had some money.
Yeah, that's something that I didn't pick up on until I saw that you mentioned it. That line. That's why you can't get at him anymore. That's what she said right there before it faded to the sled being covered with snow. So I think you're right to point that out. There's something like that there under the surface.
So also you'll I think we wait a minute. Also, I think we can see when the little boy said, "Mom," I think he said, "Mom, are you going, Mom?" She never asked that question to the dad, or he didn't.
Right.
He was always interested in his mother. Maybe the only place he ever got any love in his entire life was from his mother. Certainly doesn't seem like it was from his father.
The scene that I just showed you too, it shows the father acting all hurt, like, should we really send them off? And then as soon as the banker talks about how much money they're going to pay him, he's like, oh, it'll probably work out for the best. So, yeah.
And then whenever he said that, well, that boy just deserves a good lashing. Oh, well, that's what you think. That's why you're not going to get at him. So you don't know if he's just some hardcore roughneck kind of guy that was maybe too rough on the exterior. And then they talk about, I forget what the exact wording was right there. Something about his peace, pretty much, as a child. But they didn't realize that he was never going to have that again. That peace and contentment was gone as soon as he took off with Mr. Thatcher.
Yeah, just to segue over this whole idea of his childhood and his peace. If you guys remember too, right before he meets the singer, that's what he's on his way to do, right? He's on his way to go look at all of his childhood artifacts. That's what he tells her later. So,
Right.
yeah, so that's interesting. Even during his peak years, during his success, he's still thinking back to those childhood years. Yeah, his first marriage. One of you guys mentioned that a second ago. His first marriage. There's some great visual storytelling there with his first marriage that it doesn't quite spell out. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the editing in that scene is interesting. It kept at first they were sitting very close to each other, and then the more edits you went, the further apart they were. So by the time they were finally at their wits' end, both of them were sitting at the far opposite ends of the table from each other. So there was some really great visual storytelling there, showing the distance that this couple was going through.
I noticed that with both of them. I noticed that almost anytime you have like two characters like that in like a long uh, dinner table, and you got both of them just sitting at both ends. It's kind of meant to, for what I can tell at least, it's meant to represent their distance emotionally as well as like physically. And I saw that in that scene, and I also saw it towards the end when they're in the empty castle, and you can hear their echoes, and one of them even asked the other to repeat themselves because they're so far apart.
True.
That's a good observation. I didn't think about that close to the end of the film. Yeah, when they're in Xanadu, right?
It seemed like that his marriages and his relationships were all on a whim. Like everything except the one with Mr. Leland, that one was kind of forged in stone because they had kind of grew up together in a sense, and then they stayed together even though they were a lot different than each other. But it seemed like all his other relationships were just, they came as fast as they went. I mean, it was kind of on a whim. It wasn't anything that was had a foundation to it.
Yeah, Mr. Leland, Mr. Bernstein, that's another person who seems to stick around with him too. If I
Yeah.
recall. That's about it, right?
Mhm. But even Mr. Bernstein, like his um, views on anything, like whenever it came to him taking over the newspapers, he wasn't happy about that. He wasn't happy about how he spent his money just going out and buying these statues. And, I think he wanted to for him to more invest in his money and make it grow and treat it with respect. And instead he was kind of reckless and loose with it because that's not what he was searching for in his life.
That might show something about his character also, in that there may have been some greed there. We may also see the first maybe example of Planned Parenthood here, as he was the overseer of this young man, and there was like again the hollow love. There was just a guardian there, but this guy was probably wanting him to manage his money better for the purpose that he might come out in the better on money end.
It's curious, building off of Bill's comment, it's curious that he as soon as he reaches financial independence, that he buys the paper and then attacks the person who ended up raising him as being greedy and all this good stuff. So it's interesting. It's interesting that that's his first target, is the person who raised him. So as a newspaper man, right, he sets himself up as this voice of the people, right? He's this voice for the common person. And he's running a populist newspaper here, right? So what did you guys make of that? Did you think that Kane was genuine about that? Do you think he really did care about the common person as well as he could? Do you think he even understood the common person?
I think that he kind of took that as a joke almost, like, this is just, oh well, this is another way to spend money, so I'm going to turn it into, you know the raw truth instead of what everybody else is wanting to put out there and wanting to portray. I mean, you look at news stations today, you've got some that, like, we have this whole Trump thing, but you've got Fox News that'll support Trump and you got CNN that doesn't. So he was kind of the voice of the people, but I don't believe that he was initially doing that to be the voice of the people. I think he was doing it as kind of a laughing in the face of everything, and then it ended up becoming that he people respected that and they liked the fact that he had the truth out there. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just how I looked at it.
No, I think
I think that he did have some sort of idea that he wanted to be the man for the common people to some degree. You remember in one scene, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but they told him that he was going to lose $1 million a year. And he said something to the fact that, well, we can still go for 60 years. I don't remember how many years. But I think he learned, if he wasn't early to be the voice of the people, I think he learned that as he went along, he got accolades for that. And so I think it was pleasing to him then. He may have had to learn that as he went along.
right. Yeah, I remember that scene. He says, "Well, I'm going to keep doing it anyway. I'm not in it for my profit, right? I'm in it for representing the people, right?" Crystal, I think you're right. I think you're right to point out some political stuff with recent events with this movie. I just taught this movie 3 or 4 months ago in my last class, and like the recent events that have taken place in our country made me think of this movie. The scene where he loses the election, his paper puts out the next day, voter fraud, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't help but think of the election, our recent election here. So it was curious.
And the fact that the old governor, the one that he was running against, was just doing whatever he could to dig up whatever dirt that he could on him. That shows a lot like our political races go today. It's not so much of what I'm going to do for you. It's what, oh, well, finger pointing and what he done wrong or she done wrong so that you won't vote for that person instead of reasons to vote for them.
Goes to show politics never change.
Yeah.
I noticed that too when it said like there might have been fraud. I was like, oh well, that's an obvious parallel.
Yeah.
You can't get much more in the face than that. Like not even saying anything good or bad or whatever. Just trying to stay apolitical. It's just there was an election and somebody said there was fraud. And I mean that's you can't escape that.
Right.
You also can't really differentiate what election they're talking about because that's kind of a trend with all of them.
Yeah. It's this idea too that perpetuating truth through mass media, right? Kane obviously knew that that wasn't the truth, right? But he still spread that message through mass media. People believed it, right? So it goes to show that the power that the mass media wields, right? Putting messages like that out there, people will believe it.
I remember him signing a little declaration of sort of how he was going to treat the newspaper. And he did that with one of his buddies that was at the time his friend. And then later on in the movie, his friend sent that letter back to him after he had fired said friend. And for some reason, Kane's first instinct was to immediately shred the paper. And this was in the scene where he was talking to his current wife at the time about her singing and how it embarrassed him instead of her. I'd say his personality changed as he got older and got more worried about his self-image rather than that of others.
Yeah, that's a very good scene to point out, Ryan. He shreds the Declaration of Principles. One of the principles was I will always tell the truth, right? So yeah, he's that's very curious.
He did get more calloused, but I think one of the reasons that he ripped that up was that he had seen the change in himself from the beginning of that and how Mr. Leland thought that was like so amazing that he needed to keep that. He needed to keep that original. And then whenever it was sent back to him, it was kind of in your face. Look where you was and look where you are now. And it kind of upset him and made him mad because he doesn't want to admit what he's done wrong, but he's quick to point out what everyone else does wrong. You know, whether it's the greed of his guardian or, you know, the wrongdoing of his parents to send him away or whatever the case may be. He loves to point that out in everyone else, but not so much in himself.
Right. Yeah, definitely a character flaw in him, right? He can't point that mirror back at himself. He can shine it on everyone else, right? But not himself. Yeah, Reagan, you mentioned earlier there's no good characters. Is any of this making you feel more pity for Kane the more we're talking, or less?
Well, I feel like when he first started out, he was like kind of how you asked about how what you thought if he was how he started the newspaper, if you thought he was trying to like if he was on the people's side or if he wasn't. I feel like he was trying to be, and that's when he signed the like his declaration, and then it changed that the scene of him tearing up was the like him showing his changing character where he had built this big palace and he was no longer a part of that. You know, that's how I kind of seen that. But no, I still don't think there was any kind of all good characters. I think they all had their faults.
I felt a lot of pity for his second wife, you know, in this movie. Like she seemed to be kind of a victim almost. Um, you know, she gets showcased in these newspapers as being like the harlot who took Kane away from his first wife, right? And then she becomes almost his victim, almost being forced into doing something that she doesn't want to do, become this opera singer. So I don't know, how did you guys react to his second wife as a character? Did you find her sympathetic? Did you react negatively to her the first time?
I was very sympathetic to her, although I didn't agree with how they started things out. But
Right.
I was, because I believed that she truly loved him and was truly just looking for him to love her. I mean, a simple thing as holding her hand or something, I believe would have went so long with her instead of building her all of this hoopla that she really didn't care anything about. Yeah, she loved to sing, but I don't believe that she wanted to do that so much. She was talking about her mother wanted her to do that. So she was kind of groomed for that, but she never said that that's what she wanted to do. It was something her mother wanted her to do. And then he wanted her to, while she knew everyone was out there whispering about her. So I felt real sorry for her in the end.
Right.
Their relationship to me brings about more questions than answers. I think I don't know why was he so adamant about her singing? He wanted her to sing. I don't think it was for her gain. Maybe for his. I don't know. It seems like that brings up a lot of questions. You know, I was troubled over that relationship because I had a real um, sympathy for her, I guess, because I felt like she lived under the thumb. And though he may not have been extremely mean to her, he certainly was loving her in again, a very hollow way.
Anybody want to build off of Bill's comment here?
She was definitely a person I found sympathy in for the same reasons, and I'm not uh I'm not one to root on the relationships of people who got together after affairs,
Right.
but her in general, I just kind of, she seemed very innocent. She seemed like she had no alternative motive. She didn't even know who the guy was, and she just she went in with pure intentions and just came out heartbroken.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you guys point out the consequences of the affair. We never see that little kid again in the movie after they get married. That kid is never mentioned again. Right, so his absence in the movie is kind of, yeah, it's there, right? It's hard not to notice that absence of his son. I'm sure he's fine, right? I'm sure he's well off money wise and all that, but his son's probably going to grow up a lot like him, right? Just because he's missing that parental figure.
I thought about that too at one point, and I was thinking of usually in people today, if someone has a non-present father or mother and then they end up having kids, you either go to one extreme or the next. You go to either you don't have anything to do with them, or you do the very best you can to make up for what life that you missed and you want your child to have. So it made me think that he really wasn't caring about his son finding his innocence and his um, lifestyle that he lost, although that's all that he was searching for in his life. He kept searching for that to get back to that life, but yet he neglected his son of having that.
When he popped
Kid
up,
was actually dead.
Go
They actually said throughout the movie, that the first wife and the kid had died in a car accident, after the affair became apparent. Actually, I think several characters said it. Because if you look at each scene where they've been asked the question, Rosebud, it always leads to something unhappy that happened during that period of time. That he was supposedly happy or in love. And that was one of the things they talked about was the wife and kid dying in the car accident.
Yeah, I forgot about that detail. It's interesting still, though, that they reveal that in exposition. Like they don't show it in the movie, or they don't show his emotional reaction to it. It's interesting that it's just exposition when we learn that.
Yeah, you don't really see his reaction to it. You don't see him get the news. It's just kind of from one wife to the next. That's it.
Yeah, the movie makes a big deal of the kid being at his political speech, right? And how he goes off in a vehicle away from his parents, right? It's the last time we see him. Yeah, so
I know this movie was a challenge to me. I'm mostly through my life I've watched movies for either historical gain or entertainment. I think I may have judged this movie wrong because I think if you was to ask me, I would say it's not in one of my top 100, though many people thought it was the best movie of all time. So I had to take a little inventory there. As we're talking about this, I'm remembering more about this movie than in many movies that I really like a lot. So in some ways, though this movie may have not been the movie that I liked entertainment wise, there's a lot of psychology and sociology and all those things involved in this movie that have keyed my interest. So my class here has maybe helped Citizen Kane rise up on my movie list because of what we're seeing here, what we're sharing.
it's great, right? Yeah,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I thought the same thing whenever I first watched it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I just had to sit through that. But it's like the more that I absorbed it, and sitting here today writing my discussion before class, I was remembering all this stuff, and I was realizing the symbolism in this movie, and maybe how it relates to other people, or how maybe even at that time how it would have really tugged at someone's heartstrings, because just because you've got money doesn't mean that you're going to be happy. And there's all those other aspects that came in on it as well. But yeah, I agree with Dad. I think that I enjoyed this movie more than I originally thought that I did. Back to my thing of absorbing the movie, I think that I had to, and maybe openly discuss it before I realized and maybe appreciated the depths of it.
Yeah, I agree with the two of you. You know, when I first watched the movie, I took a class like this as a student, just like you guys. And I watched that movie in there, and I thought that was interesting, but I never fully appreciated it until I taught it, like, and how interesting and well done the plot is. It's a timeless movie, right? There's a reason why we're still talking about it 80 years after its release. Right? This makes 80 years this year since its release.
Well, there's one scene, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of the conversation. There's one scene where the camera is almost in the floor looking up. And I thought that was you don't see that much. It was such an odd place for the camera to talk to us, but yet it was very effective. Anybody remember that scene? When the camera is kind of in a lower position and it's pointing up.
What's it pointing at?
It's pointing at a person, someone that's talking, and it's just unique in itself. I thought when I was watching it, I thought, that is unique in the filming. So I guess we got to watch it again to see that scene.
I know there were some things I noticed on the technical aspect of it that I noticed, and there was one that I think we're talking about the same scene. Kane is towering over. I mean, we might not be, but in the scene that I'm talking about, Kane is towering over the second wife. I forget her name, and he walks up towards her, and he's blocking out all the light, and pretty much all you see is her face looking really scared. And then the next shot is him looking up, and he's like, there's light behind him, and he's really dark.
Is that the scene where he slaps her?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, you guys are pointing out really interesting things about lighting, especially lighting in the movie. There's lots of tricks with lighting like that he uses.
Just
Go ahead.
sorry, just like his death scene, it showed him like it was almost all black. It was, for me, it was like right when my whole TV was like black. I could barely see what was going on, and it was in snow, and I thought that was a lot, like had a lot of detail with it.
Bill, I think you said, based building off what Reagan just said, I think you said the movie kind of gave you a horror movie vibe at first, right? With the first scene of the movie showing the house.
And the music.
Right.
Yes, it did. It was kind of it was a real as soon as it came on, the music and the lack of lighting, it really got my mood real quick into a kind of not a horror movie, but I don't know how I explained it in what I wrote. I forget, but yeah, it had an effect on me as soon as the movie started.
Wasn't it like a no trespassing sign on a fence or something like
Yes.
that it showed?
Yeah,
And you can kind of take that into symbolism too if you kind of want to read a lot into it, because he didn't let a whole lot of people in, although he seemed to be looking for that. He didn't let a whole lot of people in. He wanted everyone to love him, but he wasn't so much reciprocating that love to where it was full circle. So maybe it was like no trespassing on his.
Yeah, it was a feeling of
Life too.
gloom is what I said. And you on that. And also the movie starts out with us seeing this almost Taj Mahal type place, you know, and yet it's in a setting that is dingy and dark and gloomy, and you just don't know what to expect out of it.
Alone and cold.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's in Florida, right? It still feels cold when it's in Florida of all places. The Taj Mahal is an interesting comparison there, Bill, because that was a very similar type of thing. You know, it was a monument designed for, you know, a love for a woman, right? So that's a very much a parallel here to draw. The no trespassing thing too, by the way. I think you're right to point that out too, Crystal, because the movie starts with it and it ends with it. That's the very final shot, showing the no trespassing sign again. So I think the symbolism you point out there is probably meant to be thought about, considering.
And the one, I forget exactly what's going on in the scene, but whenever you see the far window from, it's, you know, across the room, and it looks like a normal size, but then once he walks up to it, it gets to where it's so ginormous, and he's kind of standing under the windowsill. That shows a lot of the angles and the camera work too.
Speaking of which, I loved, there was a transition that I absolutely loved, which was when they're talking about the guys in the newspaper, the picture, and it zooms in on the newspaper talking about how they were loyal to the newspaper. They were there for 20 years. And then it transitions into them working for the Enquirer. I loved it. That shot in particular, like I had to go back to watch it again because I was like, wait a minute. Did it do that?
One of the most iconic image I want to show you guys, one of the most iconic images in the movie is the scene where he's giving his political speech. I can share it for you. This is a famous high angle shot. You know, anytime you look up high angle shot in a film textbook, it's usually this shot where he's giving his where he's giving his speech. Fix this here.
Something more than a hope. Jim Geddes has something less than a chance. Every straw vote, every independent poll shows that I'll be elected. Very well then. Now I can afford to make some promises. The working man and the slum child know they can expect my best efforts in their interests. The decent, ordinary citizens know that I'll do everything in my power to protect the underprivileged, the underpaid, and the underfed.
Mother, is Pop governor yet? Not yet, Junior.
Well, I'd make my promises now if I weren't too busy arranging to keep them.
Here it is.
And boss Jim Geddes knows I'll keep it. My first official act as governor of this state will be to appoint a special district attorney to arrange for the indictment, prosecution, and conviction of boss Jim W. Geddes.
Some great camera work here, right? We have the overhead shot looking down on him, right? this whole like larger than life background of his face behind them. Bill, there was even a shot. There was even a low angle shot there from the floor, looking up at him, like you were mentioning earlier.
I just picked up on something. Literally the very next scene is when he lets him know that he has dirt about the relationship. So it's him saying that he's gonna do all this and throw him in jail and stuff. And it's a wide angle shot with him looking down, and all of a sudden it implies that he has the power actually.
Right. Yeah, he's almost like God looking down, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what. Yeah, that's kind of what. Yeah, that's a good observation.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, this movie's visual storytelling at its finest, right? These are all directorial tricks that are used to tell the story through the visual medium, right? Which is visual storytelling is much different than prose storytelling, right? This is ways that we do it. One of the reasons why this movie's always one of the first ones to be in a class like this is one of the first movies that did a lot of these tricks, right? This movie was innovative for its time for all these different tricks that it used. Like a lot of 1920s movies, a lot of 1920s movies told the story, but they didn't have sound. There was lots of silent films. 1930s, there were great movies in the 30s, but still, like usually all these classes will start with Kane, just because Wells did so much of this stuff that we take for granted now.
I think that a lot of it, you usually in anything in life, you either feel it or you see it or you hear it or you can touch it. And a lot of what we seen, like because of the camera, the lighting, or the angle, made us feel a certain way. Like I felt heavy and depressed a lot through the movie. Like that's how his character, the aura that his character was kind of putting off.
Is in that last scene that we looked at, and is that Getty looking down at him? Is that correct?
Yes.
And that would be when I saw that gentleman in the movie. It intrigued me that as time goes on, of course, I'm much older than most everybody in the class, but that was a guy by the name of Ray Collins, who was the Lieutenant Frag in Perry Mason. And then I started noticing some of the actors in the movie, how they went on, like Angus Moorhead, who played in Bewitched. And so they had good quality actors, though acting has changed from now to then, or from then till now. But there were some good quality people. Joseph Cotton, and we haven't mentioned him much in this movie as the best friend, but I think it's intriguing that when this movie was made, they were very innovative, or they used new techniques, plus they used good people in this movie. So I think that's what maybe have made it so successful. Orson Welles, by this time, I don't know the answer to this question. He'd been on radio, right? And he was, I think, even Time Magazine when he was 23. But he also did a radio station, a radio program that made him very famous even before he began acting and directing. I forget what it was that he did, but it was an invasion of aliens coming to Earth. And anyway, I meant to research that and forgot to. But he was already famous before this movie was made.
Yeah, that was the War of the Worlds.
There you go. Thank you so much. War of the Worlds. That's right.
Yeah, he was also a very famous theater actor too. Like Wells did a ton of Shakespeare adaptations in New York and whatnot. He would go and do a bunch of Shakespeare films too about Shakespeare plays. So yeah, he's very much a theater man going into the film business. Found a lot of success doing so.
Did anybody have anything? Sorry, but did anybody have anything on the reason why all of the guys that are trying to figure out about Rosebud, like their faces aren't shown, they're blacked out? Like, does anybody have any theories on that? Because I noticed it and I have no idea why.
It was actually the same guy throughout the whole entire movie. And the reason why was he was assigned it because they were hoping Rosebud was either a secret love affair child or a woman. That's what they were hoping for. And actually, when you're watching the film, you kind of start realizing what Rosebud is. Or at least in my case, that's what happened. It was for me, since I watch a lot of mysteries, easy to figure out that Rosebud was about how he didn't have that love. His parents sold him, pretty much, and he never had love in his life. I think the second wife even stated, "You have all this money, but you don't give me love." I forget what it was, but it was when she was telling him, "Yeah, I can leave you." But he was assigned to look it up at the beginning when they did the newsreel. He was assigned it, and they actually, I think, at the end and even at the beginning, they show his face. The guy who's researching it, but it was the Inquirer researching it. So even after his death, the Inquirer was still trying to go off and make up this big story about him.
That makes sense for sure.
It could also maybe mean the just subjective storytelling, considering that we get pieces of Kane's character from different narrators. Maybe like certain characters might not have been obvious to that narrator, right? So maybe that's why they're blacked out. I don't know if I'm making sense here with that, but
It does. It makes sense.
Yeah, the scene that I just showed you, it showed some of the people in shadows during the political speech. You guys probably noticed.
Would it even be something like to try to figure out if the people who are asking the questions, if they are wanting that news to be bad or shameful to him, or if they're wanting it to be like, oh, look at this great larger than life guy and he said this fabulous thing. It could be for you to decide what you think that they want their answer to be, whether it be something great or something to embarrass and maybe condemn his name.
Yeah, a lot of these journalists in the movie seem to be yellow journalists, right? They seem to be all interested in it's like the National Enquirer or something like that, right? They want to dig up dirt on his life after he's dead, that type of journalism, right? Kane, in a way, is a yellow journalist, right? It talks about how he helped cause the Spanish-American War at the end of the 1800s and all that good stuff too. Of course, you guys, I don't know how much you guys know about that history, but that war was pretty much caused by the mass media. Kane wasn't a real person, but the mass media falsely reported that the Spanish sunk an American ship, and they hadn't. Right, so we went to war under false pretenses from a false news story.
It even had a catchy headline: "To hell with Spain. Remember remember the Maine."
Yeah.
It was the USS Maine.
So the movie's very historically self-aware, even of events that had just happened 40 years ago at the time. Right? It would be almost like talking about Vietnam now, right? That's pretty much the distance they were away from that when they made that movie.
Was there a reason that you wanted to start with this movie? Because I'll tell you, I think it was tremendous that we started with this movie, because this is a little bit not in plot and not in all that, but like the Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis, where you later on you go back and you watch it again, you see all these signals throughout the movie that you didn't detect the first time. But was there a reason that you wanted to start us off with this movie?
Mostly just how influential it is, right? Like
Yeah.
Wells is one of the first directors who did a lot of these tricks. And it's often been called the best movie ever of all time, right? Whether or not you agree with that, it has that reputation. So always, it's almost hard not to start the class with this movie, just because of its reputation that it has. Especially in the drama category, we're starting our course out with the drama category. This movie is like a titan within that category. You can't really teach a film class without teaching this movie, right? It's one of those movies that's so canonized, right? If you teachers who leave that off are leaving off something very important, right? So lots of movies in the class I kind of pick, right? I'm just like, oh, this might be interesting. But this is one of those movies that's always on these lists. If you can take this class anywhere in the country, and Citizen Kane's always going to be on the list of movies you watch.
I noticed too, like there are so many transitions that are just like really good transitions, and like I look at them now and I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good transition. And like I would think about that about a movie in 2021, but like that's 1941. That's probably the first time those types of transitions were ever used. There's a there's a thing that I've seen about old school basketball. I'm a big sports fan, but there's a thing that I've seen about old school basketball about how this guy was so influential that that if he played with players today, he would get smoked. But that's a credit to him because he's part of the reason why the level of play is as big as it is today. And I feel like it's kind of the same thing. Like it's on par with these movies because it just set the bar so high from that point on.
Yeah, to give another sports analogy, it's almost like this movie is the Babe Ruth of movies.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Babe Ruth probably wouldn't be too good in today's game, right? But what would baseball be without Babe Ruth, right?
Yeah, and yet we still compare everyone with that swing and with that arm, and same way that it is here. As we looked at this movie, we're thinking about other movies, and so it certainly is a great movie to compare anything with, as far as camera, lighting, actors, actresses. It certainly is even though I said it wasn't one of my favorites, it certainly is an incredible film.
Right. So you came away with more appreciation of it after discussing it. And
Absolutely. I mean, when Crystal and I watched the movie together, we watch a lot of things together. And we were, I remember me getting up once and saying, I hate this movie. This is the worst movie I've ever seen. And she did the same thing. But as we began to talk about it this week, I think both of our thoughts about the movie and what it what it stood for, it changed dramatically. So I think the second time I watch it, I'm going to enjoy it this time more than just critiquing it.
Right. Good art raises questions like we've been talking about, right? More straightforward films are straightforward, right? There's not a lot to talk about. And good art you can talk about for an hour and 15 minutes, just like we just did, right? It provokes these questions. So
Not exactly a good comparison in story, but it does remind me of like a Twilight Zone episode where you watch for me at least, you watch a Twilight Zone episode, and you can't shut up about it for the next day, because it's like, oh my god, the twist ending, but then you had so many things that was foreshadowing up to it, and it's just like your mind just blows because it was just like, yeah, I can't finish the thought, but yeah.
right. No, it's definitely it's not the most entertaining movie we'll watch, but it's definitely very artful, right? It's a piece of people will be talking about this movie 200 years from now, right? It's just one of those. And see, the thing about it, film is a very really new art, right? This movie just came out 80 years ago. Sounds like a long time, but in the history of art, that's not too long, right? So this movie will be forever canonized. That's one thing that the Congress does now, by the way. Like the Library of Congress preserves these films for, like, if they name it to their list, it's going to be preserved for as long as the Library of Congress exists. So the United States is still standing 200 years from now. People will still watch this movie. So great first day discussion, guys. I enjoyed that because, like I said, this is a class where we're all equal participants. So I learned just as much from you guys as you learned from me. So great observations. The film for Thursday is The Grapes of Wrath. Have any of you guys read the book The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Right.
I ended up watching it my junior year because my teacher was teaching about the Great Depression.
Right. Yeah, I've done a lot of research on John Steinbeck. He's one writer that I write a lot about. But the movie and the book are radically different. The main difference is the book is a lot more pessimistic and the movie is a lot more optimistic, right? So I will look forward to talking about it with you. It's a movie, it's the exemplary movie about the Great Depression, right? The book is too for books, right? This is the text about the Great Depression. So I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say about Henry Fonda's character, Jane Darwell's character as Ma Jode. A lot of these characters we're going to talk about are very iconic, especially Ma Jode. She's one of the first great female characters in film, right? So I will definitely look forward to talking about her performance with you. So it's a movie in black and white. It's got lots of nice tricks with lighting and music and camera. So look out for the same things we're looking out for now for Kane when you watch The Grapes of Wrath. So, directed by the great John Ford, who directed a ton of westerns as well. We're going to watch it. We're watching two John Ford movies in this class: The Grapes of Wrath and The Searchers. So, all right, guys. Well, I will post. So after class, I always post the videos, so you can come back to this discussion later if you want. And I'll get the Grapes of Wrath thread up so that you can post your responses before class on Thursday. As you guys see, I do read them. I give I help guide the discussion that way, right? So they are helpful to me before class to get those in. All right, guys, till next time. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Well.